consultant, trainer, facilitator, and director of POWERinU Philippines. And I welcome you to this complimentary webinar, Unlocking the Happiness Hullabaloo. Without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker tonight is Cliff Ayala, a tech entrepreneur for 30 years. He built and sold his own software company to investors in 2007 and now runs Synerbyte, a transport optimization and energy efficiency tech firm with customers in 10 Asia Pacific countries. He was a senior partner at AI consulting firm Ado AI and a board director at Magenic until it was acquired in 2021. He is an innovation consultant with exposure in telecom, banking, healthcare, and supply chain. Cliff was a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional and a software technology resource person. He has 2 graduate degrees in philosophy and business and certifications in positive psychology. And he is an author. You could see his book right on your screens. Everyone, let us all welcome our speaker, an author, a founder, and CEO of Synerbyte, Mr. Cliff Ayala.
Thank you, Elaine. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon to everyone. I sense that Elaine was hesitant in reading the title of my book, so Shitty Places and Selfish People. So good afternoon again to everyone. Thank you for being here. We have a full hour to discuss this hacking the happiness hullabaloo. So let me dive right into it. Why hullabaloo? Well, because that was actually one of the questions that came in through the registration forms, and it's simply because happiness can be confusing, and people sometimes even overthink their own happiness, but it doesn't really have to be confusing. And sometimes maybe we're happy and we're not happy at the same time, and we may wonder why, or you feel that there's something good going on in your life, in one part of your life, but at the same time in another part of your life, it's just devastating. So based on that experience, you already can see that happiness is not just one thing. It is many things. And that's what we're trying to dissect this afternoon in the 1 hour that we have. So I will start off with something a little bit more interactive. I want you to be more participative because in contrast to a face-to-face session, I really cannot see you and cannot see your reactions and cannot see whether you get what I'm saying or not. So let's use the chat box as much as we can. The chat box, for those of you who are not familiar, it's on the lower bar. Open the chat window. Can I see some responses? Can you type in yes okay? Can you type in yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start off with this question. What makes you happy? Type it in. Don't overthink it. Type it in. What makes you happy? Food, my dreams, family, my wife, I'm lying, my cars, God, church, and family, healthy, family, climbing mountains. I choose to be happy, friends. Okay, so a lot of what I see here is about people, family, friends. Other people say, some of you say when you get sleep. Others say when they feel healthy. Others say their cars. Okay, so you see food. So you see there are a lot of different things that make us happy. It's not just one thing. And um, don't think that it is wrong in that sense, right? Because you hear mababa ang kaligayahan nito because maybe hindi nga malalim yung kaligayahan. But that's not something that don't let that confuse what happiness is for you. Okay, so again, the point of that question is to bring out the idea that happiness is many things to many people. Don't try to say, oh, my happiness is just one thing, because it's not. The next thing I want to ask you is, what is missing in your life? Type it in. What is missing in your life? Or what do you wish you could have more of? Love, okay, money, relaxation, all valid, yes. Pera, courage, more travels. Anyone else? Health, time, malls, more time with loved ones. Anyone else? Adventures with friends. I see a common theme here is people, family, friends, spending time with them. Then on the fulfillment, you have fulfillment on one hand, and on the other end, you have food. Two very different things. Some people say food, other people say God, church. So again, very different things, right? So, and this is good because it again highlights that happiness is not a single thing. Okay? And that's precisely why there's so much hullabaloo about it, because people think that it's a single thing and they have a hard time figuring out what makes them happy. Okay. Now, you see on the slide here, this is my favorite definition of happiness. Pleasure and purpose over time. It's very concise, but I think it hits the spot. There are three elements here. Pleasure, that's the first thing. Second, purpose. And the third thing is over time. It's not just pleasure and purpose now, finished. You want pleasure and purpose over time. That's what actually brings you happiness. So pleasure can mean, again, sorry, you can't see. Oh my gosh. Thank you for telling me you can't see the slide. There you go. Thank you. Okay, there. I assume you see it already. Can you see it now? Can you give me a yes on the chat box? Okay, thank you. So happiness here is, as I like, the favorite definition I have of happiness is pleasure and purpose over time. So again, there are three elements. You have the element of pleasure, you have the element of purpose, and it happens over a period of time. The longer, the better. Okay. Now, again, you can even break that pleasure and purpose into several things, because purpose you can achieve purpose through many different things. Okay. Now, I now come to the point where I say there are 7 shades of happy, or 7 shades of happiness, or 7 dimensions of happiness. And that's what we'll go through in the next maybe 10 minutes. I'll just go through this quickly so that it is clear in your mind what those different types or different shades of happy are. The first one is maybe very common one, is pleasure. Okay, so we do derive pleasure from, we do derive happiness from pleasure. People don't believe people when they say, no, that won't give you pleasure, doesn't give you happiness. Oh, it does. I mean, it's not lasting, but it does give you happiness and pleasure today and next week and the week after that. In moderation does give you happiness. So don't try to be happy by removing pleasure from your life. It doesn't work. Okay? Now, the key thing to remember about pleasure is, number one, it cannot be you cannot live your life guided by the pursuit of pleasure alone. Why? Two reasons. One, habituation. Anong ibig sabihin yan? We habituate, we adapt. Example, I like ice cream. So the first spoon of ice cream is super delicious. The second still, the third still, the 10th, not as good as the first. The 20th, not as good. And the 30th spoon is like, I'm sick of it. So that's habituation. And it happens because it happens with anything pleasurable. That's the nature of our sensation for pleasure. And you can extend that to drugs. You can extend that to pornography. You can extend that to alcohol. You can extend that to many other vices. Now, so you have to be aware that you cannot derive everlasting happiness from continuous pleasure. It does not happen. That's not how we work. That's not how we're wired. Okay. The second thing, so the first thing, the question again, remember, is why can't I pursue pleasure as the primary driver of my life? The first answer is habituation. Okay. The second answer is because you end up being a user of other people. And when you do that, you will lose other people. Maybe the first time you use a person, they'll forgive you. They might not notice. The second time, maybe they'll notice, they'll forgive you. The third time, they'll forgive you. If he's crazy enough, after the 10th time, he'll still forgive you, but that will not last forever. That's going to end. That person is going to realize that you are a user. So, and you view other people only from the perspective of the pleasure that person can give to you. And that is a huge problem, because you will lose all your relatives, you will lose your family, you will lose your friends, because they will eventually, or sooner or later, see through that. Okay? So for your own self-interest, from a selfish point of view, you cannot live life being a user of other people. I'm not saying you don't use people, because that's the nature of, let's say, collaboration at work, in the workplace, in the family. We use other people in the sense that we get help from them, we get advice from them, we work on projects together. But there's a time when using other people is a good thing, and there's a time when it goes overboard and it is not good for your relationships. Okay, so that's pleasure. The next shade of happiness is health. So people mentioned earlier, source of happiness, health. Somebody mentioned climbing mountains. That's part of exercise, or just part of being outdoors. Somebody mentioned sleep. Somebody mentioned food. So these are all things that contribute to your health, and they are a source of happiness. Okay, but again, you cannot overdo it. You cannot, if you exercise too much, you get sick. If you sleep too much, you start getting lazy, you start losing actually meaning in life if you just lie around the whole day. And that's a different subject, but we can talk about that if you want to. Diet, if you keep on eating too much, all of these illnesses start to crop up. You start gaining weight, you start feeling lousy when you move. So that's part of handling your own health, and therefore it impacts on your happiness. So even if you're a person who has a lot of meaning in life, you have a strong sense of achievement. You've achieved so much in life. You have good relationships, but you have chronic back pain. You wouldn't say that you're fully happy because of the pain. So if your back is aching day in, day out, if somebody asks you, masaya ka ba? You'll probably say no. Why? Because my back doesn't stop aching. Okay, so that's another shade of happy, health. Third shade is positive emotion. So there I list down the 10 most common positive emotions. You see joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, awe, and love. Sometimes we say, oh, positive emotion, happy, just happy, and that's all we see, right? The ability to perceive, to be aware of, to identify the different kinds of emotions that we have enriches our experience of the emotion. Because different things make us joyful. So some things may make us joyful, other things may inspire us. Other things may give us hope. Other things may give us pride. So these are all different sources of happiness. And as you see, they are different emotions. Now, some of us feel that they're not happy at work because they're never inspired. And they wonder why they're not happy. But if you're aware now, oh, I never get inspiration at work. It's not just saying to yourself, oh, I'm not happy. That's one thing. But if you say to yourself, I'm not happy because I'm not inspired at work, that's a different thing. That brings you closer to a situation where you can act on it. Okay, so it's important to see and to be aware of the different kinds of emotions or positive emotions that bring you happiness. Another important thing about positive emotions is that it actually creates other shades of happiness. There's this mistaken or misappreciated view of emotions, where emotions are thought of as not valuable. They fail to see that emotions can actually bring different types of happiness. It can also bring different types of growth. The example you see here in the picture is that of joy, the emotion of joy, helping learning. So those of you who are moms or your elder sisters and you have maybe a younger sister or brother who's 7 years old or 6 years old, you brought that younger sibling to kindergarten school. And then you walk into the classroom. The little boy or the little girl, as soon as he sees the classroom and his eyes light up, and you see that he's just so in awe of all the toys in the room, that already tells you that he's going to learn to socialize faster. But if he walks into the room and he's whining, he's holding the skirt of the mom, he's complaining, he says, I'm shy, he says, I don't want to be with these kids, that will stifle the learning experience. So this is a concrete example where a positive emotion, that of joy, facilitates learning. So do not underestimate how joy can act in that process. Another example, inspiration. Inspiration fosters resourcefulness. You've probably seen in the election campaigns those who are inspired by the leaders they want to vote into office end up being resourceful in terms of being able to bring in volunteers to push forward or to act on that inspiration. So you see how inspiration, the positive emotion of inspiration, drives another kind of happiness. Okay, so what's my point? My point is, do not underestimate the role of positive emotions in creating a better you and creating your happiness. You need to leverage it. That's why we were given emotions. Okay. Next shade of happiness is is engagement. So this is the state of flow. This is the state where time stops. This is the state where you feel like you're in the zone. And this usually happens, it happens, the common example is a concert pianist, where it happens when the highest level skills of the person is engaged in an activity that he's extremely interested in. So it's not easy work. It is actually hard work. But because it engages the signature strengths of the person and the interest of the person, it pulls the person into the activity, and that brings the person into the state of flow, where he can, in this case, the pianist can be playing for hours and hours and hours, and time stops for that person. Give you an example at work. There are certain people who hate working with Excel. But there are other people who, you give them an Excel spreadsheet, their eyes light up. I mean, they get excited about it. And the more tabs and the more data and the more formulas, the more excited they are to work on it. So in this example, you see some people have certain signature strengths that define them. In this case, this person who's interested in Excel worksheets, he has certain analytical skills and certain facility with numbers and certain ability to work with spreadsheet that actually pulls him into the job. Okay, and that engagement in work brings happiness for that person. Now, if you're a person who hates worksheets, who does not have skill for working with or analyzing numbers in a worksheet, you will definitely not be happy if you were placed in that role. Because it does not match your skills, it does not match your interest, you are disengaged with the job, and therefore you become unhappy. Okay, this goes straight into the fear. These ideas go straight into the practice of job matching. You need to match the employee with the job role if you want better engagement. So this is another type of happiness. So we've seen pleasure, we've seen positive emotion, we've seen health, we've seen now engagement. The next one is achievement. So achievement is the is you reaching certain milestones of success. So for example, your goal is to get a promotion, or your goal is to finish a milestone project. Once you hit that milestone project, once you get promoted, you get a sense of achievement. And that gives you happiness. That creates happiness in you. Okay, so that can happen at work, it can happen with your personal projects, it can happen with your volunteer activities. So that's the sense of achievement. So you notice the the happiness you get from engagement is different from the happiness you get from achievement. Happiness in engagement is happiness because of the work itself you're doing or the activity itself you're doing. Happiness from the achievement is because you've reached something or a goal that you have set for yourself. Okay? I mean, I might not like spreadsheets, but I do it so that I can achieve a certain goal. So again, you will see that the types of happiness there or the shades of happy are different. Okay. Now, before I continue, you may be wondering, why are we dissecting all of this? We're dissecting all of this so that we know what we can act on. It's not just a question of I'm unhappy. It's a question of knowing why are you unhappy. And by knowing why you are unhappy, so I'm unhappy because I'm not engaged in work. I'm unhappy because I feel sick. I'm unhappy because I never feel inspired. I'm unhappy because I'm always angry. No positive emotion. I'm always angry at the house with the person, with my partner or whoever I'm living with. Now, once you're able to identify that shade of happiness that you have or you're pursuing or that you lack, that's the only time you can actually act on it. Because it's very hard to act on being happy in general. You want to act on specific shades. Okay? And when we talked earlier about pleasure and purpose over time, it's important to remember that it is not pleasure only, it is not purpose only, but it is a mix of both. And each person has to find the proper mix of pleasure and purpose that is unique to that person. And to expand that, each person has to find the proper mix of shades of happy so that you figure out which things make you happy. Okay. Remember, one of the takeaways today is to figure out, okay, what makes me happy? What specific things make me happy? And what kind of happiness is that? So that I can act on it when I live my life after this workshop. Okay, I'll move on to the next one, meaning. So meaning is the value you find in an activity because it brings you closer to a purpose beyond yourself. First thing here, activity. You cannot find meaning by being passive. And this is why I was speaking earlier about if you lie in bed the whole day, you will not find meaning. Because if you lie in bed the whole time, you're just passive. You don't need rest because you've rested already. Do not expect meaning to just knock on the door and like descend on you and then you'll feel a sense of meaning. No, that it doesn't happen that way. Okay. Meaning is something that you seek out. It happens in a state of activity. Okay. Whether even reflection. When you're reflecting, it's an activity. It's not pure passivity, right? So that's the first thing to remember about meaning. It requires being active. Second, it also requires going beyond yourself. You cannot find meaning by looking inward only. It is important that you look inward, but you have to transcend yourself. It has to be something greater than you. Okay? So that's the important thing about meaning. And we will relate this later on to relationships. Okay, relationships. So there's this 75-year study that was done in Boston at Harvard. And they traced 500 plus people from from grade school all the way to the retirement. And here they looked at everything. They looked at their standardized tests, they looked at their grades, they looked at their health, they looked at their schools, they looked at the parents, they looked at the parenting, they looked at social economic status. And then when these people ended up, they looked at what colleges they went to, and then when they got married, they looked even into the kinds of conversations these people have with their spouse. What do they talk about? What they codified the conversations to see whether it was a positive type of conversation or what are the topics that are being discussed between spouses. And they trace that all the way through retirement. And as you see here, there are several directors of the study because it was such it was a longitudinal study over 75 years. And the conclusion is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. Okay. This is not a question of quantity of relationships. It's not a question of having 10,000 followers on Facebook, nor is it a question of having 200 people at your birthday party. But it is the quality of the relationship that matters. It is when you can say, this person has got my back, that matters. It doesn't mean that you never argue with the person. It doesn't mean that you don't disagree with the person. Actually, the fact that you can argue and agree to disagree and still be friends and still know that the person has your back is a reflection of a deep level of friendship. So again, it's not because we agree on everything. It's not because we never argue or quarrel. Or it's not because there's certain that I like 100% of all the things that person says or looks or does. It's not that. It's the joke is when you show up at that person's door at 2 a.m. in the morning with a dead body, that person won't ask any questions, pick up a shovel and say, let's go. That kind of trust. I don't recommend you showing up at the doorsteps of your friends with a dead body, but I do recommend building relationships of that caliber of trust. People who you know have your back, because that is a very, very strong predictor of long-term happiness. And the data says that. Okay. So now, what is the common thing between relationships and meaning? Remember, meaning is the value you see in an activity because it brings you to a purpose that's greater than yourself. And relationships is all about trusting another person. So what is common here is that it is beyond yourself. It is, yes, it's about you, but it is not only about you. And these two things, meaning and relationships, are the strongest predictors of long-term happiness. Not to the exclusion of all the rest. Okay, remember, it's a mix. But the strongest predictors are relationships and meaning. If you do not have these two things in your life, you will not be happy. You will always feel that something is missing. Okay, so that is where the idea of transcending yourself is important. So people ask me, so are we selfish? Is it good to be selfish? Yeah, well, yes, in a sense, it's good to be selfish because actually, if you look at how we were when we were born, we have to be selfish. We were 100% needy. We needed things. We needed people. And then as we grow, we still need people. We needed our parents, we needed our yayas, we needed our teachers. And that kind of selfishness for our own growth is good, right? But there comes to a point where if you are seeking fullness of happiness, you have to go beyond yourself. Not because your religion teacher told you. Mind you, this is not a religion class. It is because that is the way we are wired. We are wired to find happiness once we're able to transcend ourselves. Okay? And it is no surprise that many of you said, when I asked what makes you happy, family, friends, church. So there's a social aspect to that. The other person is involved. Okay? So that's the thing on transcending yourself. Let me see now. Okay, to summarize those 7 shades, we are what, 7:37. Okay, let's wrap this up. 7 shades of happy: pleasure, positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement, and health. So there you have it, the 7 shades of happy. You need to figure out, where are you strong at, what's lacking in me, and what activities do I do and who do I do them with that will bring me those shades of happy. That is where we're going now. Okay? I mean, each of these shades is actually a workshop on its own, but we can't dive into that. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to figure out which of these are we strong in and which of these do we need work on, and what activities can we do to bring us those shades of happy. So many of these things I talk about in my book. You can find it at www.cliffeala.com. So let's move on to happiness flashpoints. This is an exercise I call happiness flashpoints. And a flashpoint, a happiness flashpoint is an activity, an event in your life that ignites happiness for you. Okay, so you were given a happiness flashpoint worksheet. So I hope some of you have been able to actually do the worksheet. Has anybody actually done the worksheet before the session? Can you please say yes in the chat box? Anyone? Nobody? Don't worry, I will not volunteer you. Okay, I did not finish. Yes, partial, bit confused. Okay, not yet. Okay, so okay, this is what we'll do. Let's in the interest of time, let's try to simplify this a bit. So on the left side, you see different activities. So you see outdoor activities, TV, movies, pray, eat, socialize, exercise, cook, etc. There are I think 18 or 19 activities there. And then on the top, you see the different shades of happy. So pleasure, positive emotion, health, achievement, engagement, relationship, and meaning. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, the shortcut for this is to look at the activities on the left and look at the headings on the right, and then try to figure out which activities gives me what shade of happiness. For instance, like my example here, outdoor activities give me positive emotion. Okay, eating gives me pleasure. Time with children gives me relationship, and it also gives me meaning. Okay, so that's the first question. Kind of active. You don't have to, because there are 18 or 19 activities. You don't have to list down all. All I need you to do is list down one of these one or two of these activities that give you the shade of happiness in the strongest way. Okay? The next thing you need to do is, who do you do the activity with that enhances that shade of happiness? So in this example, I say, I like doing outdoor activities with Cliff, meaning it makes me even happier if I'm doing an outdoor activity with Cliff. So for example, movies give me positive emotion, but I enjoy it more. I like doing it more if I'm watching movie with my boyfriend, or if I'm watching movies with my kid. Okay, so that answers the question, who. And then the last one is, I am strong in this shade of happy. So which shade of happy are you strongest in? Okay, so I will give you 5 minutes so that you can go through the list. Those who have not don't have it on email, you also have it in the chat box. Just for your pattern, just look at these 3 sentences. I want you to create for yourself these 3 sentences. Blank activity gives me blank shade of happy. I like doing this activity with blank. And then I am strong in this shade of happiness. So I am strong in meaning. I am strong in positive emotion. I am strong in achievement. Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes. The clock starts now. Guys, when you have them, write them down in the chat box. Time with people gives me a sense of purpose. I love being with people. I am strong in the shade of happiness. Dominic. Volunteering gives me a sense of meaning. Working on my career goals give me a sense of achievement and meaning. I feel strongly in these shades of happiness. John. Riza, I love doing it with people who share the same mission. Okay, last 30 seconds. Reading gives me pleasure and positive emotion. That's sad. I like reading by myself or with fellow bookworms. I'm strong in the shade of happy. Okay, so it's 7:48. I will stop talking now, and thank you for listening. Maybe we have a few minutes for Q&A. Shopping gives me a shade of pleasure when I shop with my sisters and mom. So you see, shopping is not as joyful if you do it alone. So Feminina apparently experiences that. Meditating first thing in the morning gives me positive emotions. I like praying or meditation with myself in the presence of God. I am very strong in the shade of happy. Cooking gives me pleasure for my family and loved ones. See, cooking may not be as joyful or not pleasurable for you if you're not cooking for your family or loved ones. That's it. Shows you that other people amplify the shade of happiness that you're enjoying. Okay, I will turn this over to Elaine for Q&A. Elaine?
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Cliff. Wow, what a wonderful session. I'm happy with the session. You've truly unlocked the happiness hullabaloo or hullabaloo. You know, how do you pronounce that anyway?
Hullabaloo.
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 Okay, I tried the dictionary audio. It said hullabaloo. So perhaps depending on who says it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'd like to just get started with the questions. I'm sure our audience right now in Zoom or even in FB have some questions in mind, and please type in the chat box or in FB. Somebody is also looking at that so that we can ask Cliff the questions that you have. We have probably about 5 minutes left for questions. Let me just get started. How do you maintain or stay happy even in the midst of calamities and pandemic, Cliff? This is one of the questions sent in during the registration.
Okay, so again, the immediate answer to that is, what kind of happy are you looking for? I mean, which kind of happy are you not having? So if you say, in the midst of calamities and pandemic, maybe I'm taking a guess. Maybe I get anxious because I don't know what my future is at work. So that's a negative emotion. In this particular case, you just need to map out what the scenario is and try to the typical reaction where the anxiety escalates is when you overthink things without figuring out what is it really you're worried about. So for instance, if I just have this general feeling of anxiety without pinpointing anything, the consequence is there's nothing I can actually act on except to keep on thinking about it, right? So if it's about I lost my work, then you have to find a job, right? So then you have to act in terms of finding other opportunities for a job.
Mhm.
And then that takes you to the next step and the next step. That's very different from a situation where you are overthinking about and you're brooding about the anxiety.
Mhm.
Another thing that plays a big role here is optimism. Optimism in the sense of it being an explanatory style.
Mhm.
So an explanatory style is, in simple terms, it's the way we explain bad events to ourselves. If
Mhm.
we explain a bad event as something that I cannot do anything about and there's nothing I can do to change it, then you're gonna get stuck.
Mhm.
But if I explain this about bad event as something that there's something I can do about it. I don't know yet what, but there is something I can do about it.
Mhm.
Then the steps, the actions that you take is consistent with that belief.
Mhm.
But if I believe there's nothing I can do about it, the actions I take are consistent with the surrender to not being able to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So that's where the optimism comes in. So you have explaining bad events as something that's permanent, meaning there's nothing I can do to change it, or explaining a bad event as pervasive, meaning it's everything in my life is a failure, right? And then the third thing is explaining a bad event as something that's totally my fault, meaning I lost my job because it's not my fault. Wait a minute, you lost your job because it's the pandemic. It's not totally your fault, right? So if you say it's totally my fault, then an action that may follow from that is I'm no good for any job anymore because it's my fault, right? But if you understand that it's not totally your fault, then the actions you will take would be different.
Yeah.
Okay?
I like that. During the pandemic, of course, many were impacted, many were affected. The uncertainty was hanging on top of our heads. So that optimism, that explanation, the series of actions which will be consistent with that. I like that. That can really help or sustain us to a happy state, despite the pandemic, despite the calamities. Thank you, Cliff. Is happy, so I guess the second question is related to that. Is happiness temporary?
Yes. Um, uh, one is because of habituation. So we also habituate to positive emotions. Um, we also habituate to a sense of achievement. Like, let's say you graduated college with let's say honors. After 20 years, that doesn't. I mean, it's not such a big thing to you anymore. Okay, so there's this thing called the hedonic treadmill. So the hedonic treadmill is this phenomenon. Is the term they used to describe the phenomenon where your level of happiness over time returns to a set point, returns back to where you are predisposed naturally because of your genes. However, there are things that you can do to actually change that level, that set point, that level of happiness. So, and some researchers say it's 60% attributed to the genes and 40% attributed to the way you think and the way you act. So there are things you can do to actually increase that level of happiness. So the question is happiness temporary? Yes, it is. So you have to keep on working at it.
Okay, that's why you hear this quote. We have to choose to be happy.
Yes.
It's a choice.
Yes.
Yeah. So is it also dependent on the phase of life, or our maturity over different phases of life or stages of life?
Of course. One of the things that causes a lot of dissatisfaction among young people, well, younger people, is social comparison. Meaning the fact that my bar for success is always the other person. That's not the right way to value. Like, we get disappointed with ourselves because we think we are not successful. And when we use other people as the bar for our success, we'll never be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Because there will always be a person who's better looking, who's richer, who's more intelligent, who's wittier, who's funnier, always, right? So that's why I define success as the state where you achieve your own full potential in the context of your values and your circumstances. Success is never in a vacuum. And that's where a lot of dissatisfaction comes from. When you start thinking that success is in a vacuum, meaning it's not affected by your own circumstances. Like if you were born into a poor family, that has impact into your happiness. No, it's useless to deny that, it doesn't matter whether you're born poor or rich. It does matter, right? That doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do about it, but don't deny that it doesn't matter, right? So it always has to be in the context of your own values, what's important to you, and in the context of your own circumstances that were given to you, that you were born into.
Okay. And what I'm hearing as well from you is that we have to acknowledge that we cannot deny, those, I guess that's part of it, right?
Yes.
Cliff, there's one question here, and this is probably the last question because we're near our time.
Okay.
How do we encounter disappointment if we are unable to achieve a goal? And that's got to do with the achievement shade of happy.
Okay. So one, just make sure you're not setting a goal that's too high for you, right? And this happens a lot when people. I used to train runners for marathons, and people always think that they can run faster than they actually can. Always, right? So what happens is they get disappointed. They trained for 6 months, they prepared for the marathon, training 3-4 times a day. It's such a huge achievement to finish a marathon, and they finish the marathon and they're not happy. Why? Because they created a goal that is actually too high for themselves, right? So, and again, this is not a question. I mean, that's where the coach comes in, because the coach tells you, hey, you're sandbagging. You're not setting a goal high enough, right? So first, make sure that the goal you're setting for yourself is something that stretches you, but something you can actually achieve. Now, what if you're not able to achieve that goal? Well, that's part of life. I mean, it happens, and there are many ways of dealing with this. One way is to always look at it in the greater scheme of things. Take a step back and look at it in the greater scheme of things, because in the heat of the moment, a failure is more painful than it is when you look at it from 10,000 feet. When you look at it from a broader perspective. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is matatapos din yan, meaning the pain you go through in a disappointment has a time limit. It usually ends. Well, of course, not always, but just as happiness fades over time, disappointment also fades over time. You just have to trust that. You have to trust that process. And maybe because maybe I'm as old as I am, and I've been through a lot of disappointments, and because of those disappointments, I've seen how the pain disappeared over time. You end up being able to deal with it and accept it. Then that perspective, that's why I'm saying this. No, it does help that over time you're again, I'm not denying the fact that it's painful. I mean, you'll be crazy, right? Or you'll be optimistic in the wrong sense if you're saying that, oh, I failed and it's not painful.
Yes.
It's painful, accept it, right? But it's not the end of the world
Yeah.
because you need to step back, you need so.
And failure, as they say, failure can be, setting up yourself for
success.
success. Yes.
Yes.
So we all learn. We can all learn from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
As long as you're not dead, there's hope.
There's hope. Agree. Thank you. Thank you for unlocking the happiness hullabaloo. It's really been a great session. I mean, we went over time a bit, but I hope everyone found this session wonderful, enlightening, and really helped us unlock our happiness. So thank you, Cliff, and we hope to have you back. And of course, we will be sending out recording of this, and you can reach us should you have any comments, questions, suggestions from this session, and also once you have watched it again in our website or FB Live. I just have a couple more of announcements that I'd like to share. Again, thank you very much, Cliff, and thank you very much to all of you who have attended this. Our special announcement is about this event, a special one that we are offering, Coaching for a Cause. POWERinU has a special program in celebration of the International Coaching Week this coming May 16 to 31st. Just make a donation of 1,200 pesos to the charity Tulong Pagkain para sa Walang Tahanan, or TPWT, and avail of POWERiNU's complimentary 3-hour coaching sessions on a first-come, first-served basis. Limited coaching slots are available. Okay, so next, Trina, you will see more of this from our website. For our next webinar, we have our very own Benji Garcia, our president of POWERinU, who will present the sailboat metaphor, a tool for self-reflection. Join us on June 7. You can register now. And of course, all of you who have watched this or joined us here in webinar, you will be receiving automatically the invite for June 7. Next one, Trina, if you can just ask everyone to take a quick webinar survey. We have, you should be seeing, we have activated the poll and you should be seeing it on your screen now. If you can just answer this one question. How likely is it that you would recommend POWERinU's complimentary webinar to a friend or colleague? So we appreciate your feedback. And of course, any other feedback or suggestions, email us. And we will definitely consider them because we'd like to continuously improve our webinar. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and see you again on June 7. This is Elaine Cercado for POWERinU. Good evening to everyone. Bye.